A sneeze issued from the tent as we approached. "Anybody home? Street medicine outreach," my preceptor called out. The tent's mouth unzipped, revealing our patient, a young man. My medical school has a street medicine team, a collection of students and preceptors who work on the streets and in shelters, providing medical care to individuals experiencing homelessness. This tent was tucked away behind a grocery store, partially shaded by a dumpster. I knelt down, offering a cup of coffee. "How are you today?" Our patient shook his head. "Not so good," he coughed. He'd become ill yesterday, fever, malaise, sore throat. He'd had a meal 4 days previously at a soup kitchen, one our team knew to be the site of a recent COVID-19 outbreak. I asked if we could offer him a COVID test. Our patient looked up sharply. "Nah," he said. "That COVID thing is a hoax." Immediately, my heart began to beat with agitation. To me, this felt like a provocation, the presentation of false facts, my own knowledge questioned, and of course, the public health ramifications of his belief. How dare he claim COVID was a hoax? A recent Kaiser Family Foundation report found that 78% of those surveyed, quote, believed or were unsure about at least one false statement, unquote, related to COVID-19. COVID-19 misinformation has created a second pandemic. What has resulted is loss of trust in our scientific institutions, failure to evaluate credible information, and a lack of agreement among neighbors on even the most basic set of facts. COVID-19 misinformation is, quote, a powerfully destructive force. One false idea can spread instantly to many vulnerable ears, unquote. But while it is true that misinformation is a tremendous burden to our public health, so too is the way that we speak of those who espouse it. We shake our heads at the ignorance, lament the selfishness of those who reject medical recommendations, effectively creating silos of us versus them that pit clinicians against patients. Infrequently do we attempt to understand the lure of misinformation. It is not often that we stop to consider how misinformation may make sense to those for whom our healthcare system has not traditionally worked well. Our patients experiencing homelessness have good reason to mistrust the healthcare system. Unhoused patients contend with profound bias, stigma, and mistreatment in our medical institutions. So too do our patients of color. We have yet to demonstrate in healthcare or society that we value the lives of our Black, Indigenous, or Latinx patients. Misinformation results from a fundamental lack of trust in one another, a breach in our ability to communicate respectfully. Mitigating misinformation can only begin when we endeavor to understand its origins. In her book, I Never Thought About It That Way, Monica Guzman makes the case for changing our approach toward those with whom we disagree. Instead of attacking one another on the merits, or perceived lack thereof, of our arguments, our inability to communicate with one another must be the starting point to engagement. We must be curious about those with whom we disagree. We must approach misinformation the same way. In my own life, I have witnessed the destructive power of false belief. A close family member refused to be vaccinated for COVID-19, subsequently failing to meet my son for over a year after his birth. I have a parent who struggles with the neurologic effects of long COVID, frequently tasked with convincing others that their symptoms are real. As I try to navigate how to keep my children safe in a world ready to move on, I meet unvaccinated patients in the clinic and on the streets who tell me that COVID is a hoax, am often terrified by the hold misinformation has on our communities. But I have learned enough from my mentors and my patients on the streets to know that building bridges back to healthcare and to community is hard. Building trust, both within our hospital walls and at our dinner tables, on the curb or in the clinic, requires patience, grace, and yes, curiosity. Guzman offers us this advice, quote, "When you want to stop listening so that you can react or respond or judge, mind the gap between what you know and what you most certainly don't. And ask one more curious question. We must attempt to see one another before we attempt to change one another." I face my patient and take a deep breath. I said, "Tell me more."